Hi everyone, welcome to Miss Adams Teacher's English Language and Literature A-Level. In this video, we're going to be having a look at the BBC One Panorama interview between Martin Bashir and Princess Diana, which comes from the Edexcel Voices in Speech and Writing anthology. I'm going to take you through some ideas about context, the genre, audience and purpose, and then we'll have a little look at some key quotes focusing on how to describe Diana and Bashir's voice, backing that up with some linguistic and literary analysis. So let's get started. This is the interview between Princess Diana and Martin Bashir that took place in the mid-90s, 1995. It's only an extract of the interview, and in the interview they discuss Diana's sort of vision for what the monarchy should look like. They discuss her relationship with her children, and they discuss her role within the monarchy and whether or not she could be held responsible for, people's negative viewpoints of the monarchy and whether it can survive, etc. It's worth having a think about the rest of the interview as well, what's not included in this extract, which is of course quite detailed conversations about her relationship with Prince Charles, and the very, very, very famous moment where she said live on TV that there were 3 of them in the marriage and it was getting quite crowded. So there's lots of kind of discussion about separation and divorce, and that does come through towards the end of the extract that we'll be looking at. So you need to be aware of people like, for example, Camilla Parker Bowles, sort of maybe subtly being referenced here, and certainly members of the royal family. In the wider interview as well, they talked about Diana's issues with her mental health, suffering from depression, issues with bulimia as well. So it was an incredibly hard-hitting interview, and it was incredibly shocking because obviously the royal family are known for not talking about their private lives and not being personal, certainly at the time, and so it really was an absolutely mind-blowing event. And what makes it more mind-blowing is some of the information that has come to light very, very recently about Martin Bashir and how he actually managed to wrangle this interview with Princess Diana, which she kept secret from everyone at the time, and it turns out that he had convinced Princess Diana's brother that there were some leaks, and leaks were being given out to the press, and he actually created false bank statements in order to convince him of this leak and to create that sense of paranoia, and so he became sort of more trusted with Diana, and the interview took place. So that information has only just recently come to light. Now, the genre, audience and purpose, or the gap, is quite complex. Obviously, it's an interview and this is transcribed, this interview. Now, because it's an interview that went live on air, you might consider how spontaneous the responses are. You have to actually realise that all of those questions would have been agreed on. So Diana would have had a chance to prepare her answers, and you'll notice as we go through some of the key quotes from it, there are moments that you can really see have been prepared and rehearsed, and moments are a little bit more spontaneous and have got more of those kind of traditional features of spontaneous speech. Now, when we start thinking about audience, it's enormous. At the time, so just specifically at the time of broadcast, 23 million viewers in the UK tuned in for this Panorama interview. That is nearly 40% of the UK population at the time. But that's not the only sort of viewing figure or audience to consider, because actually this interview has been watched and watched and watched again. It's been aired on the television, numerous times. You can access it through the internet. Snippets will be used in documentaries. And since the controversy surrounding Martin Bashir, obviously more and more people have started watching it again. It's not just the controversy there, but it's also, for example, looking at what's going on with the royals at the moment, Harry and Meghan, episodes of The Crown. It is still fueling people's interest in this story, and so the audience is still watching. A little bit more specific of the audience of the time. Obviously, you've got your built-in audience of Panorama, but people tuning in because obviously they're interested in the royals, in Diana herself, because obviously she has such an enormous following, also current affairs. Now, purposes, again, there are several purposes depending on whose viewpoint you look at. So Bashir, yeah, of course, to inform, of course, it's an interview for Panorama. But yes, it's about entertainment. The whole reason he did this was about ratings, bums on seats. And there are moments where you can see that what his intention, what his purpose is to provoke and challenge, because what he's trying to do is get Diana to tell all, something, again, the royal family were not known for. And so with Diana, she's obviously got different purposes. Certainly it's about informing for Diana because she wants to share her side of the story. That's why she's done this, because she felt that people needed to know. And she's also raising awareness about, well, certainly in this extract, we see her talking about, visiting people with HIV, and they're just raising awareness of how she thinks the monarchy should be, and kind of removing any sort of coldness or distance between monarchy and people. So when we start thinking about voices, again, you're looking at two people. So you've got to think, how does Diana sound and how does Bashir sound, and make sure that you're clear with who, which voice it is that you are identifying. And there's going to be a real range. So we're going to get a lot of rhetoric. We're going to get a lot of kind of descriptive metaphorical work from Diana. There's going to be moments of sort of passion, and also defensiveness. There's going to be challenge. It'll be interesting to look at how Martin Bashir manages to mask challenge within hedging and politeness. And we'll look at that all as we go through. So the first thing we want to look at is the opening of the extract. So obviously we're right in the middle. So there was a question beforehand, and this is the answer. So this is obviously the original question was about what British people need and what the role is, or something along those lines. So we start with, I think the British people need someone in public life to give affection, to make them feel important, to support them, to give them light in their dark tunnels. I see it as a possibly unique role, and yes, I've had difficulties, as everybody has witnessed over the year. But let's now use the knowledge I've gathered to help other people in distress. So this is a perfect example of rhetoric. This has been carefully planned. You can see all of the rhetorical devices running through here. So let's start off with this opening complex sentence. What you're going to notice is that all of the clauses are anaphoric in structure, okay, because each clause begins with an infinitive verb. Okay, it's an example of a quadratic list, and the listing in it is asyndetic because she's not using any connectives, and that really places focus and emphasis on this, on the verbs in particular, to make them feel important, support them. And then as the list builds, we end with metaphor, this lovely juxtaposition that she will give them light in their dark tunnels. Little bit of a cliche, but that's not judgment. That's about using an image that everyone kind of understands. But what's important is this idea of light. Light here is a metaphor or a symbol of hope. And that is what she is saying she can potentially do. Bring hope, bring light, bring resolution. Go on to say, I see it as a possibly unique role. Look at the way that she's hedging through this adverb here, possibly. And yes, so there's, again, a little kind of qualifier here. And yes, I've had difficulties, as everybody has witnessed. So difficulties is obviously a euphemism. She is talking about her struggles with her mental health and the kind of public discussions of her marriage with Charles. And then we've got a little bit of hyperbole, but certainly contextual referencing here, as everybody has witnessed over the years. So she's making a reference to the media and the media storm surrounding their marriage. It's slightly self-deprecating in tone here. She's almost sort of not laughing at herself, but she's sort of making a small self-deprecating joke. But the point that she also makes here is that it's about learning from those sorts of difficulties. Look at the way she shifts from first person pronoun, she's talking about her experience, and now in this contraction, so we've got a little bit of informality here, let's now, but it's let us now. So we're using inclusive pronouns. So let's together start to use the knowledge to help other people in distress. Now, little interrogative here from Bashir. Obviously, it's an interview. We're going to expect turn taking, adjacency pairs, question answer responses. But the do you think you can is actually about clarifying what she has said here and her ability. So there is a slight challenge here in that he is saying, justify, is this something you can do? Is this role yours? And Diana is offering affirmation through her repetition of this declarative sentence. I know I can. I know I can. Yes. Okay. Bashir's question here we need to have a little look at. You'll notice it's quite a long question, or it's a sequence, sorry, of two interrogatives. So up until you came into this family. So note that we've got adverbial phrase. It's a time-based, it's temporal adverb. Up until you came into this family, the monarchy seemed to enjoy an unquestioned position at the heart of British life. So another metaphor here, a very, very positive in tone, but notice the way that it's hedged and slightly undermined by the verb seemed. But when you look at that in conjunction with this subordinate clause, up until you came into this family, he is immediately asserting some sort of sense of blame or responsibility on Diana. And then he continues with his interrogative. Do you feel that you're at all to blame for the fact that survival of the monarchy is now a question that people are asking? So we've got metaphor here and obviously hyperbole, the idea that the monarchy is dying. Now, you might argue that this is hedging, you know, that he's trying to diminish the challenge or the sort of threat within the question. But actually, I would argue that this little moment that you're at all to blame actually suggests that she is to blame for at least a part of it. So I think that the challenge is definitely there. But Diana answers in, again, very declarative fashion. No, I don't feel blame. I mean, once or twice I've heard people say to me that, you know, right, notice here we've got non-fluency features, we've got hedging, which demonstrates that we're sort of moving, you know, moving a little bit out of that prepared rhetoric. She quotes here, using direct speech, Diana's out to destroy the monarchy, this criticism that suggests that she is intentionally trying to harm the royal family. But notice that it's not accredited, this idea, to anyone in particular. Something that Bashir does as well. All the way through, they talk about this broad, generalized people. People discuss, people say, people think. Whether or not those people are the royal family, the media, or the general public is what you have to decide for each one. So this could be all three. Which has bewildered me, because why would I want to destroy something that is my children's future? So note the way that we're now moving into much more emotive language, not just in the verb bewildered, but also here in these verbs, destroy, I will fight for my children, slightly metaphorical there. I will fight for my children on any level in order for them to be happy and have peace of mind and carry out their duties. Note the syndetic listing of that triad. It is very important that you look at the order of these actions, you know, feelings. First, to be happy. Second, peace of mind, to feel secure. And third, carry out their duties. So that triad demonstrates clearly in Diana's mind at that point what comes first, and that's happiness and mental health. I put this little one in without anything from Bashir. I just thought it was worth just focusing in on Diana's voice here, because there is a real sense of frustration, and it is certainly very emotional, and it's also very informal. She says they don't care. People don't care anymore. Note that we've got the generalized noun there in people. She's talking about whether or not there is a perception of indifference towards the monarchy. And so she's justifying what she has said about indifference. So we've got these simple declarative sentences. They don't care. People don't care anymore, with a lot of repetition there. What's interesting is the way that the third person pronoun has been exchanged for people, and the addition to this sentence is anymore, which suggests that there's been a passing of time, that at one point people did care. They've been so force-fed with marital problems. So that little metaphor there is a dig at the media, obviously. They've been so force-fed with marital problems, whatever, that they're fed up. So quite a colloquial term here, so quite informal, but what's particularly informal is this repetition of the pronoun whatever. So very, very informal, but also it mirrors the idea about being blasé or being indifferent. It's a sort of non-word, isn't it? Whatever. And then we have repetition of this verb phrase, fed up. They're fed up. I'm fed up of reading about it. So showing how actually in this case, she and the people are united in this frustration. And again, I'm in it, so God knows what people out there must think. So you can really see here in this colloquial phrase, her frustration at the situation. Okay, again, this is relating to how she is talking about her children and the way that she wants them to have knowledge and be able to use that knowledge. And she's talking about how she took them to visit people dying of AIDS. Bashir says, what are you hoping that experience for your children, what impact that experience will have on your children? So notice here we've got false start, we've got self-correction, so features of non-fluency features, features of spontaneous speech. You might just argue that it's because it's in the moment. There is another argument that perhaps he's sort of having to think quite carefully about how he puts this, because they are talking about the visit to people dying of AIDS, and think about the kind of controversy at the time period and the stigma that carried back then. And again, is there a little bit of judgment through this noun impact? Is there an impact on your children? But here we have once more that really emotive use of rhetoric, suggesting that this response has been planned. I want them to have an understanding of people's emotions, people's insecurities, people's distress, and people's hopes and dreams. So we've got highly charged emotive language. We've got syntactic parallelism, again, in our quadratic listing. Quadratic if we chuck that one in together, I should say. Notice the way that the listing style shifts. So you go from asyndetic listing here, and then just at the end, we've got a double and people's hopes and dreams. All of these abstract nouns, emotions, insecurities, distress, hopes and dreams. It's again Diana engaging with concepts to do with mental health, obviously drawing on her own experience. And there's a real kind of contrast between pessimism and optimism here. She's talking about the sort of negative parts of people's psyches, insecurities and distress, and then juxtaposing them with positivity and optimism, hopes and dreams. Okay. Quite a formal question here. What kind of monarchy do you anticipate? This is one of his more open questions because he is asking her to be descriptive surrounding the monarchy. So he's sort of opening the door and saying, off you go, Diana. And she says, I would like a monarchy that has more contact with its people. And now we've got a little hyphen here where she qualifies what she means. And I don't mean by riding around bicycles and things like that, just having a more in-depth understanding. So that's an allusion to Scandinavian monarchy. She's basically saying, I don't mean that they need to completely take away the sort of structures and sort of sense of hierarchy, but what she is saying is that there needs to be better empathy. So that in itself is quite a controversial comment to make, because by saying what she thinks they should have, she is also criticising what they don't. And that is why this next sentence, and I don't say that as a criticism to the present monarchy. So she's very careful here. Note the frontal coordinate conjunction here, very much feature of speech. But it adds to this idea that she's having to quickly clarify, I'm not criticising the present monarchy. I just say that as what I see and hear and feel on a daily basis in the role I have chosen for myself. So we've got this little triad here, see, hear and feel, and all these verbs are the senses. So it's almost like it's an overwhelming understanding that she has. So it's quite interesting here, because having said that she's not criticising, she then is using counter-argument and subtly saying, well, except that they are cold, that they are emotionless, that they don't have empathy. And that's really emphasized through this adverb of frequency, that she sees and hears and feels this on a daily basis, so it's ever present. And then this is interesting, in the role I have chosen for myself. So here she's using active voice, and she is being very careful to add this little pronoun here I've chosen for myself in this prepositional phrase. We're using the reflexive pronoun myself. So she's demonstrating that in this cold world, according to her, she is taking action. So she is the one trying to make change. Okay, there is a massive topic shift here in this moment, and this is where Bashir starts to, heat up the interview with discussions of very difficult topic, and that is the marriage between Diana and Charles. So there's a lot of discussion at the moment about how matters between yourself and the Prince of Wales will be resolved. So note, we're still using euphemism here. Matters, we're not saying the words so much. We've got this little determiner here. There's a lot of discussion. Again, note how broad and vague it is. No one is saying who is having the discussions. And then there's even the suggestion of a divorce between you. What are your thoughts about that? So the adverb there, even, almost suggests that the concept of divorce is really quite, shocking, which of course it is for the time. What are your thoughts about that? Again, big open question, offering Diana the opportunity. I think what he wants is for her to start holding the floor here, but actually the reverse is what happens. Note, Diana is back into these sort of declarative statements. I don't want a divorce. But obviously we need clarity on a situation, same kind of euphemism. We've had matters, now situation. That has been of enormous discussion over the last 3 years in particular. So we've got an echo here of Bashir's question, a lot of discussion, enormous discussion, and somewhat escalated. So all I say to that is that I await my husband's decision of which way we're all going to go. So she's pointing out here her powerlessness. Note the way that she still says my husband, which backs up her statement here, I don't want a divorce, the fact that she says my husband rather than Prince Charles. And again, depending on how you interpret this, where we have this inclusive pronoun here, which way we are all going to go, so future tense, what will happen, that inclusive pronoun could be her, Harry, Will, Charles. But bearing in mind she's used this phrase, my husband, stated that she doesn't want a divorce, there could be a little sneaky sort of reference there to Camilla as well, wrapped up in that inclusive pronoun. Because remember, I know she's not done it in this extract, in the wider part of this interview, she has said there are 3 of us in this marriage. So it's more than possible. Bashir's question here becomes far more direct. Yeah, this is still a little bit hedged. This one, much more direct. If he wished a divorce to go through, would you accept that? Now, that verb choice is interesting because it is positioning Diana as someone who is going to challenge that. There is a tiny little hint of the kind of troublemaker in the connotations of that. Diana, I would obviously discuss it with him. Note the use of the adverb, obviously, perhaps in response to that little bit of face-threatening act here, a little bit of challenge. But up to date, neither of us has discussed this subject. Check out that demonstrative determiner there. Again, helping with the euphemism. She's still not wanting to say that word, though the rest of the world seems to have. So again, a little bit of hyperbole, talking about the media there. Now, I said in the previous slide, is Bashir hoping that she will start to hold the floor and start to talk more openly? Well, if he was, it hasn't happened, because look at what has happened with economy of language here in Diana's responses. So Bashir is using conditional tenses here. Would it be your wish to divorce? Slightly hedged again, so he's not saying, do you want to divorce? It's using politeness strategies. He's softening it ever so slightly. No, it's not my wish. Declarative. Why? Wouldn't that resolve matters? Now, here, again, in the interrogative, we've got a real sense of challenge. Repeated euphemism, of course, as well. And this is where we start to subvert the form of interviews, because not only does Diana start to flout the maxim of quantity, Grice's maxims, i.e. she's not saying very much. Her answers are all very economical, very, very short. She also repeats the question back. Yeah, so this is challenging the form of interviews, subverting the form. Wouldn't that resolve matters? Why wouldn't it resolve matters? She's asking the question back. And now suddenly it's Bashir that's having to answer her questions. It would provide the clarity that you talk about. It would resolve matters as far as the public are concerned, perhaps. Again, note, we go back to this kind of generalized public. And then Diana brings it back to a theme that runs throughout this extract, really, is her as the mother. Yes, but what about the children? Our boys, that's what matters, isn't it? So the kind of juxtaposition between the public and the children, like the public sphere and the private sphere, she's showing that her focus is on being a mom, it's the children. Note, again, we've got our boys, okay, so inclusive pronoun, here, possessive, her and Charles, so again still showing them as united. And then we've got the rhetorical question made from the tag question at the end. That's what matters, isn't it? So again, it's about shifting that priority from public to private. And the last part here of the extract, which I think is the most threatening part on Bashir's side, where he says, do you think you will ever be queen? Now, bearing in mind the extract opened with him asserting that Diana is one of the reasons that people think that the monarchy is not going to survive, this is a really challenging question to answer, and Diana's got to get it right. No, I don't know. Clear. Look at the repetition. No, one no is not enough. Bashir continues to push here. Why do you think that? Diana says, I'd like to be a queen of people's hearts, in people's hearts, but I don't see myself being queen of this country. So we go from metaphor to literal. Note the way that she uses the article, a queen. Again, not the queen. So she's saying there in this metaphor there can be many queens of people's hearts. It's not just her. Now I think the shift in preposition in this metaphor is interesting. Queen of people's hearts, in people's heart. That shift from of to in, I think, is about being even more personal. I don't see myself being queen of this country. I don't think many people will want me to be queen. Actually, say again, little more conversational there in that little adverb. When I say many people, I mean the establishment that I married into, because they have decided that I am a non-starter. So we have had this people, many have discussed, people this, people that, and here alone in the extract, she qualifies the establishment. It's still distance, she's still not using people's names, but she is qualifying, it is the royal family, it is the establishment that I married into, because they, again, third person pronoun, not using the names, they have decided that I'm a non-starter. So that metaphor there is so powerful, so emotive, and demonstrates just exactly how she feels, that she is not sort of worth the time. Hope that was helpful. So it's quite a long video and we only probably covered about half of the content. If you've got any questions, do just drop me a line, pop them in the comments, and I will come back to you, particularly if you've got any questions on any of the parts that I didn't cover. But this is just meant to be a bit of revision. That's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Happy revising.